10 races of the 2026 Formula 1 season already behind us, and only 3 races remaining before the summer shutdown, once again, the summer break is shaping up to be filled with another classic silly season packed with transfer rumors regarding Red Bull's star driver. However, perhaps just in the nick of time, Red Bull have conveniently brought their biggest upgrade package of the season so far to their home race in the Styrian Hills, right in front of their team's top bosses. With the first race weekend using these new upgrades now complete, we're once again left with the question everyone is asking: has Red Bull done enough to prove to Max Verstappen's camp that they are still the team capable of taking him to his 5th championship in 2027 and beyond? This is HardRubber. Take off those softs, put on those hards, and with that, let's talk about it. Now guys, before we can get into anything, it's important to understand exactly what difficulties Red Bull's latest challenger, the RB22, has been suffering from. Since the season opener, the RB2022 has struggled to make meaningful progress towards fighting at the front. Aside from a couple of arguably fortunate podiums for Max and Isaac Hadjar, the latter of which was eventually removed and handed back to Pierre Gasly, it's safe to say that Red Bull haven't started this new generation of car as strongly as they would have hoped. Of course, some of these struggles were hinted at and somewhat expected before the season began. Red Bull have lost several key personnel in recent years, while also ending their successful partnership with Honda to take on the enormous challenge of building their first in-house power unit. One can also not ignore Red Bull's late development push with their 2025 challenger, the RB21, in an attempt to help Max secure his 5th title. That undoubtedly had some impact on this year's car development. One could be forgiven for expecting Red Bull to struggle initially against the big teams, mainly Mercedes and Ferrari, during their debut season of their own engine program, but naturally you would still expect the outfit from Milton Keynes to compensate for any engine deficits with a strong chassis package. However, against all expectations, the opposite seems to have happened. Instead, Red Bull Forward Powertrains appears to have produced one of the best power units on the grid, at least according to Adu, but that's a topic for another day. So if the engine isn't the problem, where exactly has it all gone wrong for the RB22? Well, besides simply being a little bit behind in development compared to some of the rival teams, the RB22 suffers from several fundamental balance issues. The chassis has unpredictable suspension characteristics under varying loads, and the car also lacks overall downforce. As a result, its biggest weakness so far has been in the high-speed corners, which is unfortunate considering how prominent those are in the 2026 Grand Prix calendar lineup. But above all, the RB22's biggest issue seems to come down to one simple fact: the car is heavy, way too heavy. The RB22 has been overweight for the entire season up till now. Although the Miami Grand Prix update helped shave off some mass, the car was still reportedly around 6 to maybe 7 above the minimum weight, at least according to sources in the paddock. This excess weight causes slower cornering, sluggish braking, and severe tire degradation, leaving Red Bull with an incredibly narrow and difficult car setup window. This would explain many of the struggles Max and Isaac have suffered so far. All of these issues have contributed to a disappointing, though somewhat expected, season for the Red Bull drivers. But with fans growing increasingly impatient and pressure mounting from the Verstappen camp to deliver a competitive car for the 4-time world champion, how exactly has Red Bull responded? Well, in typical Red Bull fashion, they went all in and threw all their cards on the table, bringing a whopping 7-part upgrade package to their home race. It was a major package, one that Red Bull Racing hoped would have left a strong impression in front of their home crowd, as well as Red Bull's higher-ups, including Shalem Yuvadha, sorry I completely butchered that, Mark Mazatitz and Oliver Mitzlaff, all of whom were present at the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend. With that level of scrutiny, it is important for Red Bull Racing to impress not only them, but also Max Verstappen and his camp. So what exactly did Red Bull do? What were these 7 upgrades that Laurent Mekies and his team pinned their hopes on, and how might they help the RB22? First, let us address the most obvious issue, the weight. The engineers in Milton Keynes attempted to reduce the RB22's excess weight by altering the underbody of the car and redesigning several components, allowing the use of thinner materials than those used in the launch spec version of the car. Of course, changing these components and searching for weight-saving solutions would inevitably affect the car's existing dynamics. These modifications likely introduced new handling variables, forcing Red Bull to work around issues that they may not have previously encountered before. Moving on to the aerodynamic side of the car, we can see a number of the changes, some clearly inspired by the most dominant car on the grid so far, the Mercedes W17. The major focus of the package was the side pods and, as a consequence, the floor and the floorboards. However, smaller tweaks were also made in front of the rear tires, with new Mercedes-inspired slots being added along with changes at the rear of the car. Starting with the side pods, we can see that everyone's favorite Pierre Waché's technical team altered their geometry by introducing a new shape featuring more of an undercut at the front and less volume through the mid-section. Wow. Around the side pod inlet specifically, the Mercedes inspiration is obvious, with a new profile that is significantly thinner and flatter. This of course helps to further strengthen the undercut effect, which should reduce drag while also helping channel airflow efficiently towards the rear of the car. Next, looking lower down towards the bargeboard area, Red Bull appears to have taken an aggressive approach by splitting the bargeboard structure into multiple distinct elements. By doing this, one can assume Red Bull hopes to generate stronger and more energetic vortices to better seal the airflow beneath the car. This would naturally help stabilize the car under load and improve compliance during ride height changes in the medium speed corners, ultimately producing more downforce. Next, we can see the flanks of the side pods have also been given a more straighter profile. By slimming this section down and abandoning the previous more pronounced thick curves, Red Bull should promote cleaner airflow towards the rear axle while also hopefully reducing drag. At the front of the rear tires, we can also see that the Milton Keynes outfit once again took inspiration from Mercedes by adding these small little slots. In simple terms, these are added to improve the airflow around the diffuser while directing the compressed turbulent air created by the rear tires, commonly referred to as tire squirt. The goal, of course, is to keep the airflow towards the rear of the car as stable and energetic as possible. This helps reduce the risk of airflow separation or the diffuser stalling at the lower speeds, or giving Red Bull more confidence to run the car with greater rake. That directly affects how much downforce the car's underfloor can generate through the Venturi effect. Finally, at the rear of the car, the exhaust deflector has also been heavily redesigned. This may have been done to optimize the interaction between the exhaust gases and the airflow coming from the upper bodywork, directing that airflow towards the beam wing and the rear diffuser. In theory, cleaner airflow extraction should generate more grip around the corners. All things considered, it's fair to say that Pierre Waché and his team have made a significant effort to bring meaningful upgrades to the RB22 in an attempt to close the gap to the rivals. But the question is, has it worked? Well, now considering Max Verstappen finished on the podium with a brilliant second place result, just 1.6 seconds behind race winner George Russell, one can safely say it was a better weekend for the Red Bull outfit. Hadjar also showed some strong pace, securing a valuable P6 finish after battling with the McLarens and Ferraris, who, it's fair to say, simply weren't at their best this weekend, especially Ferrari considering their strong Spanish Grand Prix last time out. Looking deeper, not only was it Max's first runner-up finish of the season, splitting the two Mercedes, but perhaps even more encouraging for Red Bull was the overall performance of the upgraded RB22. For the first time this season, the RB22 topped the average race pace charts in Max Verstappen's hands, albeit by a razor-thin margin of just 0.07 seconds over Russell. Moving on, with the Austrian Grand Prix seeing air temperatures reach 36 degrees and a track temperature climb over 50 degrees Celsius, tire strategy and management were always going to be a major talking point. Fortunately for Red Bull, it appears the RB22's diet has paid off. There was a noticeable improvement in the tire wear during the race, which translated into obviously stronger race pace performance in the long runs. Earlier in the season, the overweight RB22 struggled heavily with tire degradation and temperature management, so seeing Verstappen record the third best tire degradation figure at just 0.13 seconds per lap would have no doubt put a smile on Laurent Mekies' face. Then again, Red Bull still remains behind Mercedes in that area. As for the strategy, that remains up to debate, with many fans believing Red Bull's final pit stop timing may have cost Verstappen a genuine shot at victory. Some argue that pitting 1 or 2 laps earlier in the final stint could have given Max the undercut he needed to overtake Russell. Of course, this remains speculative, and there's no guarantee this would have changed the final result. So, nevertheless, a positive post-race reaction from Isaac Hadjar, along with a moderately satisfied Max Verstappen despite narrowly missing on victory, should give Red Bull encouraging signs that they're at least moving in the right direction. Some rivals in the paddock, including Lewis Hamilton, believe Red Bull may have found as much as 0.4 of a second in race pace. If true, that would make them a serious contender for race wins and allow them to challenge the dominant Mercedes far more consistently in the races ahead. Furthermore, Isaac Hadjar also hinted that the RB22 is still quite a difficult car to drive and that the team has not yet fully unlocked the potential of the Austrian upgrade package, suggesting that Red Bull could still find another 10 for 2, perhaps if they better understand how to optimize this upgraded package. So with that all now out the way, we now understand what Red Bull has changed on the RB22 through its substantial Austrian upgrade package, along with some of the early indications of its effectiveness. But the ultimate question still remains, is it enough? Well, has the upgrade package given Max Verstappen and his camp enough confidence to believe that Red Bull is still the right team for the short-term future, or should he consider activating his escape clause and start exploring other options for 2027 and beyond? Well, although nothing is ever set in stone, based off everything we've seen so far at the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend, I think Red Bull have at least done enough, at least for now. They may have not completely silenced the doubts, but they've at least bought themselves time. With George Russell's Mercedes seat for 2027 looking increasingly secure, and Zach Brown appearing to dismiss any McLaren rumors by backing his current driver lineup, it seems increasingly likely that Verstappen may have little choice but to remain with the Milton Keynes outfit for at least another year. Whether this will be enough to secure Max's long-term future for 2028 and beyond, should he choose to remain in Formula 1, remains very much up for debate. A lot will depend on how much further Red Bull can develop the RB22 and whether they can continue giving Max a package capable of consistently fighting near the front in the second half of the season. That also, of course, depends on how quickly their rivals continue to improve. Toto Wolff has already indicated in classic Toto Wolff fashion that there's already another upgrade package planned for Belgium, which could prove to be another major step forward for Mercedes and perhaps deliver the knockout blow for rival teams' hopes this season. And of course, we can't rule out the reigning Constructors' champions McLaren or the Ferrari, the seemingly limitless budget giants from Maranello, who will no doubt continue their aggressive development race. If Red Bull wants to ensure the Austrian Grand Prix performance wasn't just a once-off, they need to keep pushing the development as hard as possible, and I think that's, fair to say. However, budget cap restrictions will inevitably become a factor at some point, potentially forcing them to slow down. Until then though, Red Bull must continue developing and continue to learn their car, maximizing every bit of performance from their current package as possible. That, along with perfecting setup and getting the most out of the tricky Pirelli tires at every circuit, will be crucial if Red Bull hopes to keep their star driver long term. But what do you think about Red Bull's Austrian upgrade package? Do you think Red Bull has done enough to convince Max Verstappen to stay? Or do you fancy his chances elsewhere? Let us know down in the comments below. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching our very first video on HardRubber. As this is our first video, we'd really appreciate any feedback and suggestions so we can continue improving our content. But this has been HardRubber. Until next time, goodbye.